Jason stood at the edge of the dense forest, his boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground. The air was thick with moisture, a mix of wet leaves and earth that seemed to wrap itself around every breath. He adjusted the straps of his heavy backpack, tightening them with practiced hands. This wasn't his first time guiding a group through these wild woods, but it felt different today. It was like something in the air had shifted, an uneasy tension he couldn't shake. His clients had already set up camp for the night, their voices fading as they found shelter under the tall pines. Jason glanced at the fading light, a golden streak cutting through the clouds above. A perfect sunset if he ever cared enough to notice. But today his thoughts were somewhere else, somewhere distant. He felt his heart tighten as he thought about his daughter, and the last time he'd stood in a place like this, shaking the thought away. He turned back toward the campfire and made his way down the narrow trail, where the others were still laughing and talking, already making dinner. That's when he saw her, Maya. She was crouched low, her camera pointed at something in the underbrush. He could barely make out the shape of the animal she was tracking, but he didn't need to. He'd seen her do this before. Her focus was all-consuming, and for a moment she seemed to forget the world around her. Jason couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. It was the third time this week she'd gone off on her own without saying a word. Always with the camera in hand, as if the wilderness were some kind of art exhibit, just waiting to be captured. "Maya," Jason called out, his voice firm but not unkind. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she lifted the camera slightly, trying to get a clearer shot. Jason waited, his patience wearing thin. He didn't like this kind of behavior. It wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. "Maya," he said again, stepping closer. "I told you not to wander off alone." Finally, she lowered her camera and turned toward him. Her face was streaked with dirt, her hair wild from the wind. But there was something about her gaze, something that made him stop. It wasn't defiance, but something more distant, like she was a million miles away. "I wasn't going far," she replied, her voice soft, almost apologetic. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It doesn't matter. You need to stay with the group. We're not here to play photographer." Her eyes flickered, and for a moment he thought she might argue, but she didn't. She just stood there, silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jason felt a pang of guilt, but he pushed it away. The last thing he wanted was to feel sorry for her. She wasn't his responsibility. He was here to make sure everyone survived the trip, not babysit some idealistic photographer who thought she knew better than anyone else. "I'll be back to camp in a minute," she finally said, her tone almost apologetic. Jason didn't respond. He just nodded and turned on his heel, walking back toward the others. He heard Maya's footsteps follow behind him for a moment, but then the sound stopped. When he glanced over his shoulder, she was already heading off again, deeper into the woods. Jason shook his head, but he didn't turn back. His thoughts wandered again back to that night when he'd failed to protect his own family. He'd made a promise to himself after losing his daughter that he would never again put someone else in a dangerous situation, never again allow someone to wander off alone, as if the wild didn't care, as if they were invincible. But here he was, looking after people who had no idea what they were getting themselves into. It was hours later when Jason began to notice the change in the air. The wind had picked up, and the sky had darkened faster than he expected. A storm was coming, he could feel it. The faint scent of rain lingered in the air, and the distant sound of thunder rumbled low in the sky. He glanced toward the campfire. The others had already gathered their things and started packing up, the mood lighter now that they could feel the approaching storm in their bones. But Jason's mind wasn't on them. It was on Maya. She hadn't returned. Jason glanced toward the tree line, frowning. He should have known better. She had wandered off earlier, but she hadn't come back when she said she would. Jason's frustration flared up again, but this time, it wasn't just about her disobedience. It was about the fact that she could be in real trouble. He stood there for a moment, watching the trees sway in the growing wind, before he made up his mind. He didn't like it, but there was no choice. He couldn't leave her out there alone. "Maya!" he shouted into the trees, his voice carrying over the growing wind. "Maya!" No answer. The wind whipped through the branches, and the first raindrops began to fall. Jason gritted his teeth. He grabbed his flashlight and started moving toward the edge of the woods, calling her name again. His mind raced with thoughts of what could have happened. Maybe she had tripped and hurt herself. Or worse, what if something had found her? He pushed through the underbrush, his boots slipping on the wet ground, and kept moving deeper into the forest. His mind flashed back to 100 other times he had hiked through the wilderness, guiding people, keeping them safe. But none of them had been like Maya. None of them had felt the way she did, like she was a part of the wilderness, so wrapped up in her passion for photography that she forgot about everything else. Jason's breath quickened, and his heart beat faster, each step making him feel more and more anxious. But as he reached the small creek where they had crossed earlier, he saw something, a flash of movement. "Maya?" He called again, louder this time. There she was, and crouched low, her back to him. She was so focused on something that she didn't hear him. Jason hesitated for a moment, then jogged toward her. "Maya," he said, his voice softer this time. She didn't even flinch. He reached out and touched her shoulder, his fingers cold against her skin. She jumped at the contact, spinning around with wide eyes. Her camera fell to the ground with a soft thud. "I've been looking for you," Jason said, his voice more tired than angry now. "It's getting dark. We need to head back before the storm hits." Maya blinked at him, her face pale and her lips parted as if she was about to say something. But nothing came out. She just stood there staring at him, caught somewhere between surprise and something else. Jason didn't know what it was, but he wasn't going to wait around to figure it out. "Come on," he said again, a little more urgently. Maya finally nodded. Though she didn't speak, she seemed to be in some kind of daze, her eyes distant. Jason had seen that look before. It was the look of someone who had pushed too far into the wilderness, someone who had gone beyond the point of no return. He turned and started walking back toward camp, Maya following silently behind him. The wind had picked up now, the trees groaning under its weight. Jason could hear the faint rumbles of thunder in the distance, and his pace quickened. They didn't say a word to each other as they walked, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Something between them. Maybe it was the wildness of the forest, or maybe it was something else. But the storm was coming, and so was the reckoning. Jason moved carefully through the thick forest, the sky growing darker with each passing minute. Rain started to fall gently, tapping on the leaves above like soft drums. Maya was walking just behind him, but she seemed weak, her steps uneven and slow. Jason's eyes stayed on the path ahead, but his mind was full of worry. The woods felt different now, colder, heavier. The smell of wet earth mixed with the sharp scent of pine needles. Every sound was louder, the drip of rain, the snap of twigs underfoot, and the distant rumble of thunder growing closer. Jason kept calling Maya's name softly, but she didn't answer. Suddenly Maya stumbled. Jason reached out quickly and caught her before she fell. She looked up at him with tired eyes, her face pale and lips trembling. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice was weak. Jason didn't believe her. She was shivering and her breath came in short gasps. "We need to find shelter," Jason said, pulling his jacket tighter around him. "The storm is getting worse. We can't stay out here." Maya nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She looked scared now, and Jason felt a sharp pain inside his chest. He was supposed to keep her safe. This was his job. Yet here they were, lost in the wild as the storm closed in. After walking a few more steps, Jason spotted a large fallen tree lying across a small clearing. It was a perfect place to take cover, at least for the night. The tree's thick branches created a natural roof that would keep them dry. Jason helped Maya down, and she sat against the trunk, her body shaking. He pulled out a small emergency blanket from his backpack and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Try to stay warm," he said gently. "I'll make a fire." Maya watched him silently as he gathered dry twigs and leaves, working quickly despite the rain. She admired the way he moved with skill and calm, like the forest was a part of him. She felt a little ashamed for wandering off alone. Maybe she had been careless, thinking the wild was just a place for photos, not danger. Jason lit the fire carefully, the small flames flickering and pushing back the darkness. The warmth from the fire was a relief, and Maya moved closer, wrapping her arms around herself. They sat quietly for a while, listening to the storm grow louder above them. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by the deep roll of thunder. "I'm sorry," Maya said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. "I didn't mean to worry you," Jason okayed her, surprised by the honesty. For a moment she seemed vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen before. "It's not just about worry. he said slowly. It's about respect. This place isn't safe if you don't take it seriously. Maya nodded, looking down at her hands. I know, I wanted to prove something. To myself. Jason's eyes softened. He understood that feeling. The need to prove you're strong, to be more than your past mistakes. You're lucky I came looking for you, he said quietly. This forest doesn't forgive mistakes easily. They sat in silence again, the fire crackling between them. The storm raged on, but for the first time something had shifted. The walls they had built around themselves, Jason's cold distance and Maya's stubborn independence, began to crumble. Maya looked up at Jason, her eyes shining in the firelight. Thank you, she whispered. Jason nodded, not trusting his voice. He felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. They were both broken in different ways, but right now they were together, and that was enough. The night stretched on, full of rain and thunder, but also something new. A quiet connection formed in the wild, born from fear, hope, and the simple need to survive. The rain kept falling softly, wrapping the forest in a quiet, steady rhythm. The fire crackled between them, throwing warm light on the wet leaves and damp earth. Jason sat close to the flames, watching Maya as she hugged her knees, still shivering but a little calmer now. The storm outside had not stopped, but inside their small shelter, a fragile peace had settled. For the first time since they met, Jason felt his guard start to lower. Maya, too, seemed less distant. Her eyes held a new softness, like she was trying to trust him, even if just a little. Jason reached into his pack and pulled out a small bottle of water and a packet of energy bars. He handed them to Maya. She looked at the food with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Taking a small bite, she chewed slowly, savoring the simple taste. You need to eat, Jason said gently. It's important if we're going to make it through this. Maya nodded but didn't say anything. After a moment, she finally spoke. I didn't think I'd be out here like this, she said quietly. I thought I was ready. I thought I could handle anything. Jason looked at her carefully. Sometimes the forest teaches you lessons you didn't expect. She smiled weakly, and then something in her eyes changed. She seemed to want to say more, but the words got stuck. Jason shifted closer. You can talk to me, he said softly. I'm listening. Maya took a deep breath. I lost someone, she began. My brother. He loved this kind of place, the wild, the animals. He was always trying to save them like me. Jason waited quietly, giving her space. He died in a fire a few years ago, she continued, her voice trembling. I promised him I would keep going. I'd show the world what's out here. The beauty, the danger, but sometimes I feel like I'm just running away from everything. Jason's heart tightened. He knew that feeling well. I lost my daughter, he said finally, a few years ago. We were camping and I made a mistake. I wasn't there when she needed me. Maya looked at him with wide eyes, sensing the pain behind his words. It's hard to talk about, Jason said, but I think maybe that's why I came looking for you tonight. Because I couldn't let history repeat itself. Maya reached out and touched his hand lightly. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could say. For a while they sat quietly, the firelight flickering on their faces. Outside the storm was fierce, but inside a different kind of storm had passed, one of grief and healing. Suddenly a sharp noise made them both jump. A low growl came from the edge of the clearing. Jason's eyes snapped toward the sound, muscles tensing. Stay close, he whispered, standing slowly. Maya moved closer to him, her breath quickening. The growl came again, louder this time, a warning. Jason grabbed a thick stick from the ground and held it ready. The firelight flickered against the dark shapes just beyond the trees. A pair of glowing eyes appeared, then another. A small group of wolves had surrounded their shelter, curious but cautious. Jason kept his voice steady. We're not a threat. Just stay calm. Maya's hand found his arm, gripping tightly. For a moment, they both stood frozen. The wild so close it felt like it could reach out and pull them in. The wolves circled slowly. Then, after a tense pause, disappeared back into the forest. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Maya looked at him with awe. Wild animals, he said. They sense fear and respect. We have to remember that. Maya nodded, her eyes shining. I've always wanted to see them up close. But not like this. The storm began to ease, the rain turning to a soft drizzle. The fire crackled louder as the wind died down. They sat back down by the flames, the silence now feeling less heavy. Maya's body was still weak, but her spirit seemed stronger. Jason felt something shift inside him too. A flicker of hope, maybe. They had survived the wild together that night, and somehow, it had brought them closer. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, Jason looked at Maya and smiled softly. "We'll get through this," he said. Maya smiled back. Together. The sky was just starting to brighten when Jason woke. The storm had passed, leaving the forest fresh and quiet. The air smelled clean, like everything had been washed new. He turned his head and saw Maya still sitting by the small fire, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes closed but her face calm. Jason stood slowly, careful not to wake her. He stretched his stiff muscles and looked around the clearing. The ground was wet and soft, but the forest felt less threatening now, almost peaceful. For the first time in a long while, Jason allowed himself to feel a small hope. He walked a few steps away and took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the cool morning air. Then, without looking back, he returned to Maya's side. She opened her eyes and looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "We should move," Jason said softly. "We need to get back to camp before the others start looking for us." Maya nodded, slowly rising to her feet. She stretched her arms and took a few cautious steps. Jason noticed she was still weak. Her legs trembled slightly and her breathing was uneven. She was clearly not ready for a long walk, but there was no other choice. Jason offered his arm to her and she took it gratefully. They started walking slowly, Jason leading the way. The forest was still damp from the rain and the ground was slippery in places. Every step had to be careful. As they walked, Jason kept an eye on Maya, making sure she didn't fall or get too tired. She didn't say much, but Jason could feel her gratitude. Sometimes words weren't needed. After an hour or so, Maya's steps grew slower and she finally stopped, leaning heavily against a tree. "I don't think I can go much further," she said quietly. Her voice was tired but steady. Jason looked around, knowing they were still miles from camp. The thought of carrying her made his muscles ache, but he didn't hesitate. "I'll carry you," he said firmly. Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Jason bent down carefully and lifted her into his arms. She felt light, but he knew the effort would soon wear him out. They moved on, Jason's steps steady and slow. The forest around them was waking up with birdsong and soft rustling leaves. The morning sun broke through the clouds in patches, shining on their path like small blessings. Jason thought about how much the night had changed things. He remembered the fear in the storm, but also the quiet moments, when Maya had shared her story and he had shared his own pain. It was strange how pain could connect people, how two strangers could find a bond in the wild. As he carried her, Jason felt that bond growing stronger. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he knew he didn't want to let go. Finally, after what felt like forever, Jason spotted the faint glow of the campfire in the distance. Relief flooded through him. They were almost home. When they reached the camp, the others were just waking up, calling out for them, worried but hopeful. Jason gently set Maya down and she smiled weakly at the group. A medic rushed over, checking Maya carefully. Jason watched, feeling a strange mix of pride and protectiveness. Maya was safe now, thanks to him. As the medic talked to Maya, Jason slipped away quietly, heading into the trees. He needed a moment alone, to breathe, to think. Standing among the tall pines, Jason closed his eyes and let the wind brush over his face. The forest was still alive with the sound of birds and rustling leaves. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt calm. Back at camp, Maya watched Jason disappear into the trees. She wanted to call out to him, to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she stayed quiet, feeling something shift inside her, something like hope. The days after they returned from the forest passed quietly. Maya rested in a small cabin near the ranger station, surrounded by blankets, medicine, and the sounds of the forest that had almost taken her. People came and went, staff checking on her, asking questions, and making sure she had everything she needed. But the one person she thought about the most never showed up. Jason was gone. The morning after their return, she had seen him disappear into the woods, his back straight, his steps steady. Since then, she hadn't seen him at all. No goodbye, no note. Just gone, like the storm had swept him away with everything else. Maya told herself it didn't matter. They had survived. That was the important part. But something deep inside her had changed during that night in the forest. The way he had looked at her, the way he had carried her without hesitation, the way they had eaten it up to each other when the world around them was falling apart. And now he was gone. Weeks passed. Maya's strength returned, and she prepared to leave the cabin behind. Before she packed her camera, she carefully slid out the memory card and checked the last few photos she had taken before the storm hit. Most were blurry from the rain, but one image made her stop and stare. It was a small fox curled up under a rock ledge, barely visible in the shadows, but safe and alive. She remembered snapping the picture just before Jason found her. Something about that moment had stuck with her. The fragile, quiet beauty of life surviving the wild. She printed the photo, framed it, and wrote a note on the back. Some things survive storms for a reason. Then she sent it to the only address she had for Jason, a P.O. box from the registration form. Jason found the package 2 weeks later. He hadn't been expecting anything. The days after the forest rescue had passed in a blur. He had returned to his quiet life, tucked away in a small cabin far from town. He hadn't told anyone what had happened. He didn't talk about the storm, or Maya. Opening the package, he pulled out the frame and stared at the photo. A fox in the wild, peaceful, alive, and safe. Then he turned the frame over and read the message. His hands trembled slightly. He sat down on the wooden steps outside his cabin and stared out at the trees. The forest was calm now. The sky was blue. Everything felt distant and close all at once. He took out a pen and paper, something he hadn't used in a long time, and started to write. Months later, the air was cooler, touched with the early signs of fall. Maya stood inside a small art gallery near the edge of a national park, watching people walk slowly past her photos. Each picture on the wall captured a quiet, hidden moment in nature. A baby bear peeking from behind a tree, a bird mid-flight in the morning fog, a deer resting in tall grass. But it was the photo of the fox that drew the most attention. A few people paused in front of it, reading the caption, "Taken the night I almost didn't make it back. Proof that even the wild gives second chances." Maya watched them read it, her heart beating a little faster. She turned away to greet a friend when someone stepped through the door behind her. She didn't hear him at first. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, quiet as ever. But she felt it. She turned. Jason. He stood just inside the gallery, wearing the same jacket she remembered, though it looked a little more worn. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something softer than before. Something familiar. They looked at each other for a long moment. No words, just breath, just presence. And in that silence, something passed between them. Not everything needed to be spoken. Some things were just understood. She walked over to him slowly. He didn't move. When she reached him, she smiled. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she said, her voice quiet. "I wasn't sure I'd come," Jason replied. "But God, then I saw your photo." "I meant what I wrote," Maya said. "I know," Jason answered. Another pause. "A kind one. Are you okay?" he asked finally. Maya nodded. "I am now." Jason looked around the room, taking in the walls filled with images of wild places and quiet strength. Then he turned back to her. "You did something good here." "So did you," she replied, looking straight into his eyes. Jason gave the smallest smile, the kind that came from deep inside, not just his mouth. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lost. He wasn't a guide anymore. He wasn't just a man carrying pain. He was someone who had been broken and survived, just like her. They didn't talk about the forest. They didn't need to. It would always be a part of them. That night, the fear, the firelight, the wolves, the way their hearts opened when everything else was closing in. Maya walked back toward the photo wall, and this time, Jason followed. They stood in front of the fox photo together. "It almost looks like it's smiling," Jason said. "Maybe it is," Maya replied. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft and steady, and inside, two people who had once been strangers stood side by side, quiet and whole. They had survived. Together. The gallery was quiet after the visitors had left. The soft hum of the lights and the gentle creak of the wooden floor were the only sounds. Jason and Maya stood side by side looking at the photo of the fox. a symbol of survival, hope, and new beginnings. Neither of them wanted to break the silence just yet. Words felt heavy, as if the moment was too fragile for them. Jason finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "I've been thinking about that night. How close we came to losing everything. How easy it would have been for one wrong step to end it all." Maya nodded slowly. "It was terrifying. But somehow we didn't give up. We kept going. That night changed me," Jason said. "Not just because of what happened, but because of you. You reminded me there's still something worth fighting for." Maya's eyes softened. "I was scared. More scared than I've ever been." "But you were there. You didn't let me fall." Jason shrugged, but the small smile on his lips showed he felt it too. "We held each other up." They talked about the forest, but not about the dangers. Instead, they spoke of the quiet moments, the stars shining above them, the crackling fire, the sound of the rain falling through the leaves. For the first time, they shared their hopes, not just the fears that had haunted them. Maya wanted to keep telling stories through her photos, to show the world the wild places and the creatures that lived there. Jason wanted to help people connect with nature, to teach respect and care for the land. Together they began to imagine something new, a journey that wasn't just about survival, but about healing, growth, and connection. Days turned into weeks, and they worked side by side, planning hikes, organizing talks, and sharing their stories with others. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled them. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Jason and Maya stood at the edge of the forest. The air was warm, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Maya held her camera, ready to capture the moment. Jason looked at her and smiled. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Together they stepped into the woods, not as strangers lost in the wild, but as partners ready to face whatever came next. The forest stretched before them, full of mystery and life. The path was uncertain, but they walked with steady hearts, bound by the night they had survived and the future they were creating. As the sun set, their shadows stretched long and close side by side. They had been broken, but they were healing. They had been lost, but now they were found. And in that moment, everything was possible. The early morning light filtered softly through the trees, casting long shadows on the forest floor. Jason and Maya moved slowly along the narrow trail, their footsteps quiet on the soft earth. The forest was waking up around them, birds beginning their songs, leaves rustling gently in the cool breeze. They had been working together for months now, turning their shared experience into something more than just a memory. Their story had touched others, people who wanted to learn, to heal, and to reconnect with the wild places they had forgotten. As they walked, Maya lifted her camera and took a few quick shots of the sunbeams breaking through the branches. Jason watched her, the way she focused on small details, finding beauty in the simplest things. "You see the world differently," he said softly. Maya smiled without looking up. "I've learned to. It's about paying attention to the light, the shadows, the moments others miss." Jason nodded, thinking about how much he had changed. The forest had taught him patience, humility, and the strength to keep going even when things felt impossible. They reached a clearing where wildflowers grew in bursts of color, a hidden patch of sunlight surrounded by tall trees. Maya knelt down, adjusting her lens to capture a close-up of a bee hovering over a blossom. Jason sat on a nearby log watching her. The quiet between them was comfortable, not forced or awkward, but a shared space where words weren't always needed. After a while, Maya looked up and met his eyes. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. Jason thought for a moment. "Every day. It changed everything." "Me too," Maya said. "I used to be afraid of the wild, the darkness, the unknown. But now it feels like home." Jason smiled. "It's funny how fear can turn into strength." They sat there together, watching the forest around them come alive with the sounds and colors of a new day. Later, as they packed up to leave the clearing, Jason reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook. "I started writing again," he said. "Thought maybe it was time." Maya's eyes brightened. "Can I read?" He handed it to her, and she flipped through the pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. Stories of the forest, reflections on life, and moments they had shared. "This is good," Maya said softly. Really good. Jason shrugged, but the pride in his eyes was clear. As they walked back toward the trailhead, the sun climbed higher, warming their faces. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time it felt full of promise. Together, they were no longer just survivors of a wild night. They were creators of a new path, one built on trust, courage, and the quiet power of hope. And that was a story worth telling. The forest felt different now, softer somehow. The sharp edges of fear and doubt that had once made every step heavy had faded into something gentler. Jason and Maya walked side by side on the trail, their voices low as they shared thoughts and dreams. Maya paused to take a photo of a bird perched on a branch, its feathers shining in the sunlight. Jason watched, her noticing the way her eyes lit up with quiet joy. Every moment counts, Maya said, lowering her camera. The little things, the small signs. They remind me why we keep going. Jason nodded. I never thought I'd feel that way about the forest. It used to scare me. Now it feels like a place where I belong. They had both learned to listen, to the rustle of leaves, the whispers of the wind, and to each other. Their journey had brought them closer, but more than that, it had changed how they saw the world. As they walked deeper into the woods, Jason stopped suddenly. Look. Ahead of them, a small stream flowed quietly over smooth stones. The sunlight danced on the water's surface, creating shimmering patterns. Maya smiled and stepped closer, crouching by the edge. She dipped her fingers into the cool water and closed her eyes, breathing in the fresh scent of earth and water. Jason sat on a nearby rock, feeling the peacefulness settle over him. For the first time in a long while, the weight inside him lifted, replaced by a calm certainty. They stayed there for a while, sharing silence and the simple beauty around them. No words were needed. Later, as the day grew warmer, they found a place to rest under the shade of a tall oak tree. Jason pulled out the notebook he had started months ago and began to write again. Inspired by the calm and the company, Maya watched him, feeling grateful for the man who had carried her through darkness and helped her find light. Do you think we'll ever forget that night? She asked quietly. Jason looked up thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe it will always be a part of us, a reminder of what we can survive. Maya nodded. I like that. It means we're stronger than we think. Their eyes met, and in that moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. They knew the path ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be storms and shadows. But together they were ready. Because sometimes, the wildest nights lead to the brightest mornings, and some bonds, born in fear and hope, last forever. The sun was low in the sky, casting warm golden light through the trees. Jason and Maya walked slowly, the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet the only sound besides the distant call of birds. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if it too was listening to their quiet conversation. They had come a long way since that wild night, a night filled with fear, pain, and uncertainty. But that night had also brought them together, changing their lives in ways they never expected. Jason stopped and looked out over a small clearing where wildflowers bloomed in colors that seemed almost too bright for the quiet forest. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past slowly lifting. Do you ever think about what life would be like if we never met? He asked. Maya smiled softly. Sometimes. But I don't like to think about it for long. It feels like something would be missing. Like a part of me that I didn't know was lost. Jason nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Me too. They sat down on a fallen log, the wood smooth and cool. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the kind of peace that only comes from shared experience and trust. I've been writing a lot lately, Jason said, pulling out his notebook, trying to put everything into words. Maya leaned in to look at the pages, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting. Stories of survival, moments of fear but also of hope and strength. You have a gift, she said quietly. Your words make things real, not just for you but for everyone who reads them. Jason smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. Thanks, that means a lot. They talked about their plans for the future, more hikes, more stories, and maybe even a project to help others learn how to respect and protect the wild places that had saved them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest grew cooler and the first stars began to twinkle above. Maya looked up and sighed happily. I think this is just the beginning. Jason reached over and took her hand gently. I think so too. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the sounds of the forest, two people who had been strangers once were now connected by something deeper, a bond forged in survival, trust, and a shared hope for what was to come. The morning was cool and bright, with sunlight filtering softly through the leaves. Jason and Maya stood at the edge of a small lake, the water smooth and clear, reflecting the sky like a mirror. The quiet was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the stormy night that had brought them together months ago. They had both grown so much since then, not just in strength, but in understanding. The forest, once a place of fear and danger, had become a place of healing and hope. Maya lifted her camera and took a few photos of the lake, capturing the stillness and light. Jason watched her with a gentle smile, feeling grateful for the journey they had shared. "Do you ever think about the future?" Maya asked, lowering her camera. Jason thought for a moment. "All the time. It's no longer something I'm afraid of. It's something I want to build." They talked about the plans they had made and working together to protect the land, sharing their stories and helping others find the same strength they had discovered. As the day moved on, they explored the forest together, their steps light and sure. The past was still a part of them, but it no longer held them back. They had learned that survival wasn't just about facing danger. It was about connection, courage, and the willingness to keep moving forward. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jason and Maya sat by a campfire, the flames crackling softly in the growing dark. They shared stories and laughter, the kind that comes from knowing someone deeply. The bond between them was strong, built on the wild night they had survived and the many moments that had followed. As the stars appeared overhead, Maya looked at Jason and said softly, "Thank you for being there." Jason reached out and took her hand. "Thank you for trusting me." In the quiet of the forest, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the strength of their connection, two people who had once been strangers found something rare and precious. They found hope. They found healing. They found each other. And in that moment, everything felt possible. The air was fresh and cool as Jason and Maya walked along a quiet path in the forest. The leaves rustled softly and birds sang high above in the trees. It was a peaceful morning, one that felt like a new beginning. They had faced so many challenges together. The fear, the cold, the wild unknown. But those moments had changed them. They were no longer just people who had survived. They were people who had grown. Jason looked over at Maya, noticing the calm in her eyes and the way she seemed to carry herself with quiet confidence. It was a strength born from experience, from facing the night and coming out stronger. "I was thinking," Jason began, "about how much we've both changed, how much that night shaped us." Maya smiled softly. "It did, but not just the night. Everything after. The way we learned to trust, to listen, to be patient." They stopped by a small stream, the water clear and cool as it bubbled over the stones. Maya knelt down, cupping her hands to take a sip. Jason watched her, feeling a deep sense of connection. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we didn't help each other?" she asked. Jason thought for a moment. "I try not to, because I can't imagine life without you now. We needed each other more than we knew." Maya nodded, her gaze softening. "It's strange, isn't it? How fear and desperation can bring people together in ways you never expect." Jason smiled. "Yeah, sometimes the hardest moments create the strongest bonds." They spent the day walking, sharing stories and plans. Their dreams were no longer distant hopes, but steps they were ready to take together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the forest, they found a clearing and sat down on a fallen log. The silence between them was filled with understanding. Jason took out his notebook and read a few lines aloud, words about survival, hope, and the quiet power of trust. Maya listened, feeling the meaning behind each sentence. When he finished, she reached over and took his hand. "We've come a long way," she said. "We have," Jason agreed. "And there's still so much ahead." In that moment, surrounded by the soft sounds of the forest and the fading light, they both knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together, because sometimes the most difficult nights lead to the strongest mornings, and sometimes the wildest journeys lead to the deepest connections. The soft morning light filled the forest, making the leaves glow with a gentle green. Jason and Maya walked quietly along a narrow path, surrounded by the fresh scents of earth and pine. The air was cool, but the warmth of the sun promised a good day ahead. Their journey had been long, filled with moments of fear, hope, and discovery. Each step they took seemed to bring them closer, not just to safety but to understanding themselves and each other. Maya stopped to take a photo of a cluster of wildflowers growing between the trees. Jason watched her for a moment, admiring her quiet focus. "Do you ever think about how much we've changed since that night?" she asked softly. Jason nodded. "All the time. I was afraid then, lost in so many ways, but now, it feels like we've found something real." Maya smiled. "It's strange how the hardest times can teach us the most." They walked on, sharing stories about their pasts, moments they had never spoken about before. They laughed about small things and quietly admitted fears they still carried. As they reached a small clearing, the sunlight poured down, making the grass shine like gold. They sat on a fallen log, the warmth of the sun comforting their tired bodies. Jason pulled out his notebook and began to write, the words flowing easily now. Maya listened, feeling the power of his thoughts. "This feels like a new beginning," he said, "not just for us, but for everything we believe in." Maya looked at him with hope shining in her eyes. "Together we can face anything." They stayed there, watching the clouds drift across the sky, knowing that their story was far from over. But no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. Because sometimes survival isn't just about making it through the night. It's about finding light in the darkest places, and sometimes the strongest bonds are born from the wildest storms. The day began with a soft breeze that moved through the trees like a gentle whisper. Jason and Maya walked slowly along the forest path, their steps light but purposeful. The memories of the past months were still fresh, but they no longer weighed heavily on their hearts. Maya stopped to pick up a smooth stone from the ground, turning it over in her hand. "It's strange," she said, "how small things can remind us of big moments." Jason smiled, watching the sunlight play on the stone's surface. "Yeah, like how one night can change everything." They found a quiet spot near a bubbling creek where the water flowed clear and cool over the rocks. Sitting side by side, they let the peaceful sounds wash over them. Jason pulled out his notebook and began to read aloud some of the stories he had written, tales of survival, trust, and the quiet moments that had meant the most. Maya listened, feeling the deep connection between the words and their shared journey. "Your writing makes me see things differently," she said softly. "It's like the forest speaks through you." Jason looked at her with gratitude. "And you help me see the beauty in the details, the little things that make life worth living." They talked about their hopes for the future, helping others, protecting the wilderness, and building a life that honored the lessons they had learned. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they packed up their things and started the walk back. The forest was quiet now, filled with the soft sounds of night preparing to fall. Maya glanced at Jason and smiled. "No matter what comes next, I'm glad we're in this together." Jason squeezed her hand gently. "Me too. Together we can face anything." Under the fading light, two people who had once been strangers found strength in each other, a bond forged in fear, hope, and the wild heart of the forest.